a play!
That's a violation.
What a good rhythm, and he got it.
You feel all the running won't affect you.
He's the GOAT. But for years, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was treated like he did not belong at the center of basketball's biggest debate. When fans argue about the greatest player of all time, the names come fast. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson. Those names light up comment sections and fill up highlight reels. But one name sits at the very top of the all-time scoring list. One name forced the NCAA to rewrite its own rules. One name built the most unstoppable shot in the entire history of the sport. And that name is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He won 3 national championships in college. He won 6 NBA titles. He earned 6 MVP awards. He played at the highest level for 20 full years. He scored more points than anyone who ever picked up a basketball. And yet, in the loudest conversations about the greatest ever, his name often comes in late, or it does not come in at all. As we look back at why so many legends still give Kareem his crown, you can give this video some hype too, so more fans see the story behind one of basketball's true kings. The case for Kareem does not start with a single moment. It starts with a life built around the game from the very beginning. He was born Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr. in New York City. He grew up in northern Manhattan, in a neighborhood called Inwood. Even as a child, he was not just thinking about basketball, he was thinking about what kind of person he wanted to be. He read books, he studied history. He paid attention to the world around him. He looked at figures like Rayford Johnson, the Olympic decathlete, and he admired the way Johnson was respected, not just as an athlete, but as a complete human being. That was what Alcindor wanted. He did not want to be seen only as a tall kid who could score. He wanted to be seen as a thinker, a person of substance, someone with something to offer beyond what he could do on a court. That mindset, that belief that real greatness begins in the mind before it shows up on the scoreboard, shaped everything that came after. When it was time to choose a college, Alcindor had one school on his list above all others: UCLA. He had dreamed of it since grade school. He actually wrote it down in a school album as his favorite college, years before any coach ever called him. In March of 1965, he made his first recruiting visit to the campus in Los Angeles. Then he sat down with head coach John Wooden. The office was modest, inside an old World War II building. Wooden did something that surprised young Alcindor. He did not lead with basketball. He led with grades. He looked at academic records before he ever looked at statistics. He told Alcindor directly that athletic careers are fundamentally temporary. They end. The body ages. The game moves on without you. But knowledge, Wooden said, stays with a person for life. That message landed hard. That was the kind of place Alcindor wanted to be. He chose UCLA. And what followed was something the sport of basketball had never quite seen before. Before Alcindor was even allowed to play varsity ball, he was already sending a message. In his freshman year, he led the UCLA freshman team in a game against the varsity squad. That varsity team was the reigning national champion. They had already won the whole thing the year before. They were loaded with talent. They were supposed to be untouchable. And Alcindor and the freshmen beat them anyway. It was a preview. It was a signal of what was coming. When he finally stepped onto the varsity floor for real, he made the whole country take notice on his very first night. His varsity debut came on December 3, 1966. He went out and scored 56 points against the University of Southern California. That set a school record. That was not a soft performance in a warm-up game against a weak opponent. That was a declaration. That was a young man stepping onto the biggest stage available to him and immediately telling everyone exactly who he was. From 1967 to 1969, Alcindor led UCLA to 3 straight national championships. 3 years in a row. 3 titles. 3 times earning the Most Outstanding Player award at the NCAA tournament. His teams did not just win, they dominated. He went 88 wins and only 2 losses across his 3 varsity seasons. When you think about all the games played over 3 college seasons, with pressure and opponents and everything that can go wrong, going 88-2 is an almost unreal achievement. He was not part of a great team that happened to win. He was the reason the team was great. Without him, they would have been a good program. With him, they were unstoppable. He was so far ahead of the competition that the sport itself felt the pressure to respond. And it did. After the 1967 season, the NCAA made a decision that had never been made before in the history of college basketball. It banned the slam dunk. The rules committee explained the ban by calling the dunk an unskillful shot. But people inside the sport understood what was actually happening. The rule was aimed at Alcindor. It was a specific attempt to remove one of his most powerful tools from the game and slow down what he was doing to the competition. The situation even had an official name. It was called the Alcindor syndrome. The sport identified his dominance by name and then tried to legislate against it. Years later, when the ban was finally lifted in 1976, the Rules Committee chairman confirmed publicly that the rule had indeed been put in place, specifically to neutralize what Alcindor was doing near the basket. The sport changed its own rule book because one player was too good. Think about what that means. An institution as large and powerful as the NCAA looked at one college player and decided the only answer was to change the rules. That is not normal. That does not happen. It happened here because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was not a normal player. But here's the part that changes everything about how you see this story. Alcindor did not quit. He did not become bitter. He did not shrink. He took the restriction and turned it into fuel. John Wooden told him to see the ban not as punishment, but as an opportunity. He told him the restriction would force him to develop a more complete skill set. He told him that a player who could only dunk was limited. A player who was forced to find other ways would become dangerous in a completely different way. Alcindor listened. He took that message to heart. He worked on a shot that he had already been developing, a move that used his body, his height, his touch, and his intelligence in a way that no one had ever quite put together before. He refined it. He sharpened it. He made it automatic. And what came out of that process became the most famous and most feared offensive weapon in the history of basketball, the skyhook. To understand why the skyhook was so special, you have to picture it in your mind clearly. Kareem would establish his position near the basket. He would plant himself, feel the defense around him, and turn his body sideways relative to the rim. His non-shooting shoulder and his arm would swing into position between the defender and the ball. That created a physical wall, a shield. The defender could not reach through Kareem's own body to get to the basketball, then Kareem would leap. He jumped off his non-dominant foot, which allowed his shooting arm to extend freely without being blocked by his body. At the very top of his jump, he released the ball. His hand was reaching somewhere between 10 and 11 feet above the floor at the moment of release. The ball rolled off his fingertips with soft touch and traveled on a steep, high arc toward the basket. It came down into the hoop at an angle that made it easier to go in cleanly. And by the time a defender had processed all of this and tried to react, the ball was already past them and already on its way through the net. The physics of it were remarkable. A defender watching Kareem set up in the post had two choices, and both of them were bad. The first choice was to try to anticipate the shot early and jump before Kareem released the ball. The problem with that was Kareem was already taller than almost every player he faced, and his release point was up near 11 feet. Even if a defender guessed right and jumped at exactly the right moment, they usually could not get their hand high enough to reach the ball before it was gone. The second choice was to wait until the shooting motion actually started and then contest it. The problem with that was the shot was already in the air. By the time it was clear he was releasing, the reaction time required to jump and reach the ball after seeing the motion begin was simply more than a human being could manage against a shot released at that height. So the choices were jump too early and miss, or react too late and still miss. The defense was always a step behind. The skyhook put every opponent in an impossible situation every single time it was used. Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest post players the world has ever seen, said it plainly during the 1986 playoffs. He noted that once Kareem established his routine near the basket, he could launch that skyhook over any defender in the league. Not most defenders, any defender, not most situations, any situation. Even Mark Eaton, who stood 7 feet and 4 inches tall and won the Defensive Player of the Year award multiple times, could not find a way to get to it. Kareem's release cleared Eaton's reach. A man who was nearly half a foot taller than the average NBA center still could not stop the shot. The height advantage that defenders thought they might have, the extra inches that should have made the difference, simply did not matter once Kareem had the ball and his mechanics in motion. Bill Russell, who never faced Kareem in a professional game, but who understood defensive basketball as well as anyone who ever played, spent time thinking about how he would approach the skyhook if he had to guard it. Russell was one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of the sport. His answer was honest and realistic. He believed the best approach was not to try to block the shot itself, because that was almost never going to work. but to put physical pressure on Kareem before he received the ball. Russell noted that Kareem preferred to operate about 12 feet from the rim when he set up to shoot. If a defender could force him to catch the ball further out, even a few feet further, the angle would change, and the efficiency of the shot would drop. The arc would be longer, the rhythm would be different. It would make the shot harder to execute at its usual high percentage. But even Russell was careful in how he said this. He framed it as a way to reduce the damage, not a way to stop the move. The skyhook had no true answer. It only had better and worse ways to deal with the damage it caused. Compare it to the other great post moves in basketball history, and you begin to see how different Kareem's weapon really was. Hakeem Olajuwon built the dream shake out of footwork that he first learned playing soccer as a child. He explained his approach to younger players almost like a physics lesson. He talked about load-bearing walls and columns in construction, how you make a defender shift his weight to one leg and then attack that leg before the defender can move it. The dream shake was unpredictable and brilliant. It forced defenders to guess and then punish them for guessing wrong. Dirk Nowitzki and Kevin Durant developed high-release fadeaway shots that combined their exceptional height with a backward lean that created extra separation from the defender. Shaquille O'Neal used mass and force. He planted himself as close to the basket as he could get, absorbed contact, and scored over or through whoever was there. Each of these moves was elite. Each was nearly impossible to stop when the right player used it under the right conditions. But the skyhook was something different. It did not rely only on footwork. So a defender who was quicker could not simply stay in front of it. It did not require a fadeaway lean that a long defender might still be able to reach with exceptional timing. It used body shielding, vertical height, precise touch, and a release point that existed above where most human beings could put their hand. Other great post moves could be disrupted under the right defensive pressure. The skyhook, once Kareem was set and in his rhythm, was almost always simply above where the defense could go. This is the shot that built 38,387 career points. That number is still the all-time scoring record in NBA history. It has stood for decades. LeBron James chased it for his entire career and eventually surpassed it. But it took one of the greatest players who ever lived the better part of 2 decades of elite performance to get there. Every single point that Kareem ever scored in the NBA has the skyhook at its foundation. And the skyhook itself was born from a rule that existed specifically to slow him down. The system tried to take something away, and Kareem built something immortal out of what was left. The people who faced him and played alongside him have never forgotten what he was. Magic Johnson spent years running the floor in Los Angeles with Kareem as the anchor of the team. Magic has said clearly and repeatedly that Kareem was the smartest player he ever shared a court with. He watched Kareem master every detail of basketball. Not just the physical skills, but the mental approach, the preparation, the film study, the understanding of how defenses would try to attack him. Magic has specifically said that when comparing great centers across basketball history, Kareem stands alone at the top. He placed Kareem above Shaquille O'Neal when asked directly to name the best center he had ever seen. That is a statement from a man who played alongside both of them, who ran offenses built around each of them, who understood exactly what each one could and could not do. His answer was Kareem. Larry Bird spent some of the most intense playoff moments of his career competing against Kareem. The Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers built one of the most famous rivalries in basketball history during the 1980s, and Kareem was at the center of the Lakers' side of that rivalry. Bird pushed back hard against the idea that Kareem does not belong at the top of the all-time list. He pointed out that Kareem's impact was immediate from his very first professional season with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was not a slow starter who needed time to figure out the NBA. He arrived and he was already dominant. Bird asked a question that is hard to answer with any real logic. How do you keep someone like that off any all-time list? The honest answer is that you cannot. You look at what he did across his entire career and you acknowledge that it was extraordinary, and you put his name where it belongs. Julius Erving knew Kareem as well as almost any opponent could. They competed directly against each other 26 times across their careers. The record between them was perfectly split. 13 wins for Kareem, 13 wins for Erving. It was as close to an even competition between two legends as the sport has ever produced. Erving's teammate Moses Malone sometimes suggested that Kareem had not truly outplayed him in their individual head-to-head matchups. But Erving himself looked at the full picture and reached a different conclusion. He called Kareem the ultimate franchise cornerstone. He talked about how Kareem elevated every teammate he played with, how players around him became better, how the team became more dangerous because he was in the middle of it. He named Kareem as the greatest player of all time. Not one of the greatest, the greatest. That comes from a man who competed directly against him, who fought for every win, who understood the difficulty of what Kareem was doing from the closest possible perspective. Years after both of them retired in 1992, Irving and Kareem played a televised one-on-one exhibition called Clash of the Legends. The final score was 44-21. Kareem won by 23 points. Even deep into retirement, even long past the era when either of them was playing regularly, the result was not close. The crown stayed on Kareem's head. Shaquille O'Neal came into the NBA with a combination of size, strength, and skill that reminded people of the great centers from previous generations. He went on to become one of the most dominant forces the sport had ever seen. When the conversation among fans and analysts turned to the question of who the greatest center of all time was, Shaq gave his honest answer. He looked at Kareem's longevity, his titles, his scoring record, his consistency across 20 years, and he placed him in a category that felt separate from everyone else. Even a player as dominant as Shaq acknowledged that Kareem's place in history was above his own. Isaiah Thomas experienced Kareem's intelligence firsthand in the most pressurized games imaginable. The Detroit Pistons and the Los Angeles Lakers met in the NBA Finals in the late 1980s. Thomas was playing some of the best basketball of his career. He was assigned to help double-team Kareem in the post, which was one of the few strategies that gave the defense any real chance of disrupting the offense. Thomas moved into position. He closed in tight on Kareem, and Kareem looked him directly in the eyes and asked a simple question. He said, "Hey, is this your man?" And before Thomas could even begin to process what was happening, before he could decide how to react, Kareem dropped a perfect pass right over his head to Magic Johnson, who was standing exactly where Kareem knew he would be, for an easy layup. 5 words, one look, one perfect pass. It was basketball intelligence operating at a level that went beyond any physical skill. Kareem was reading the floor faster than everyone else on it. He saw where the help defense was coming from before it arrived. He knew where Magic would end up. He knew exactly how to get him the ball and exactly when to release it. Thomas was not just trying to defend a body, he was trying to keep pace with a mind that had been studying the game for longer than Thomas had been playing it. Thomas also witnessed something during the 1985 finals that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Kareem was 38 years old. The Boston Celtics had made public comments suggesting that Kareem was past his prime, that he was too old to be a real defensive challenge, that the Lakers should not be leaning on him to carry the offense. Those comments reached Kareem, and something changed in him. He went out and played like he needed to prove something, which at 38 years old and after everything he had already accomplished, he absolutely did not need to do. He won Finals MVP at 38, against the Celtics in the championship round. Thomas watched all of this unfold and said something that became one of the great quotes attached to Kareem's legacy. He said he just hoped he would even be alive at 38, not that he hoped to be playing well at 38, not that he hoped to be competitive at 38. He said he hoped to be alive. That was the level of amazement Kareem produced, not just as a young dominant force, but as a 38-year-old man who had enough left to be the best player in a championship series. Kobe Bryant was relentless in his pursuit of knowledge about the game. He studied the greats, he watched film, he borrowed from footwork and techniques that came from players who played before him. When Kobe started thinking about how to extend his career and maintain his effectiveness as his body aged, he studied Kareem. He watched Kareem's footwork. He paid attention to how Kareem prepared for games and for seasons. He looked at the discipline and the long-term approach that allowed Kareem to stay relevant for 2 decades. Kareem became a direct model for Kobe, proof that preparation and intelligence could extend a career in ways that pure athleticism alone could not. LeBron James eventually became the player who broke Kareem's all-time scoring record. Throughout that pursuit, LeBron spoke about Kareem with consistent respect. He saw Kareem as the ultimate example of what longevity in the NBA could look like, a player who had not just lasted for 20 years, but had stayed productive throughout, who had adapted his game as his body changed, who had figured out how to remain meaningful at an age when most players had already retired. That kind of consistency across time requires intelligence about your own body, discipline in how you train, and the ability to keep evolving when things that used to work start to fade. Kareem had all of that. Michael Jordan is almost always at the center of any GOAT conversation. his name is usually mentioned first. His championships, his scoring titles, his defensive ability, his competitiveness, all of it adds up to one of the most complete packages in basketball history. And Jordan acknowledged the skyhook specifically as something that had no real peer. He said that nobody in the history of basketball created a more unstoppable signature move. Jordan spent his entire career developing offensive weapons that defenses could not fully answer. He understood what it meant to have a move that put the defense in an impossible position. He looked at the skyhook and recognized it for what it was: a shot without a true counter, a weapon without a real defensive response. When Jordan says a move is the most unstoppable in history, that means something. The rivalries Kareem navigated throughout his career helped define and strengthen his legacy. He first encountered Wilt Chamberlain as a teenager at the famous Rucker Court in Harlem. Chamberlain was his idol at that point. He was the greatest center the sport had ever seen. Wilt looked at the young Alcindor and offered an unusual compliment. He said he wished he had legs like that. It was an odd thing to say, but it revealed something. Even the greatest center of a previous era could see that something remarkable was coming. As Kareem's career grew and his accomplishments stacked up, the relationship between the two of them became complicated and eventually hostile. Wilt felt the pressure that comes with watching your successor rise to challenge your place in history. He began using media platforms to criticize Kareem. He suggested publicly that Kareem should have retired years before he actually did. Kareem eventually responded directly in his 1990 autobiography, where he addressed his former idol with words that were harsh and personal. He accused Chamberlain of quitting on his team when things got hard and pointed to specific moments in Chamberlain's career as evidence. He had deeper objections as well, about Wilt's political choices and his public statements about women. The exchange was raw and personal. It showed that the pressure of all-time greatness is real and heavy, and that even kings argue with each other about who holds the crown. The rivalry with Julius Erving was different in its texture. They competed intensely on the court and held deep respect for each other off it. That perfectly even head-to-head record across 26 games, 13 wins for each of them, is one of the most remarkable statistical facts about that era. Two legends, meeting repeatedly at the highest professional level, unable to separate themselves over the course of their careers. It was the kind of even competition that tests both players in every possible way. And Erving, who had experienced Kareem's game from the closest possible distance, still named him as the greatest of all time. There is one season in Kareem's career that reveals something important about how the world perceived him versus how he was actually performing. In the 1977-78 season, Kareem was not named an All-Star. It was the only time in his entire 20-year career that this happened. The catalyst came in the season opener against Milwaukee, when a rookie center named Kent Benson elbowed Kareem hard in the stomach during a play. Kareem was in real pain. He reacted by throwing a punch. The punch fractured his own hand and kept him out of the lineup for 2 months. He missed 20 games. The Lakers went 8-12 without him, which is exactly what you would expect from a team that just lost the player holding everything together. When the coaches who vote for All-Star reserves sat down to make their picks, they had only seen Kareem play 31 games. Some of them also penalized him for the punch. They saw it as a character issue, an overreaction that told them something negative about him, even though he had been the one who was elbowed first. But look at what his numbers said while all of this was happening around him. He was averaging 25, 8 points per game. He was averaging 12, 9 rebounds. He was averaging 4, 3 assists. He was averaging 3, 0 blocked shots. He led the entire league in player efficiency rating. He was the most efficient individual player in the entire NBA that season. He was named to the All-NBA second team. He was named to the All-Defensive second team. He finished 4th in the MVP voting. By every measurable performance standard, he was one of the best players in basketball during those 31 games, and he was not selected as an All-Star. Perception punished him when the numbers said he deserved to be there. It was one of the clearest examples in his career of the gap between what he was actually doing and how the public saw him. The contrast with his final season makes this point even more vivid. In 1988-89, his last year in the league, Kareem was averaging 10, 1 points and 4, 5 rebounds per game. He was 42 years old. He was not playing at an all-star level by any reasonable standard. Don Nelson, coaching the Golden State Warriors, said publicly that all-star spots should go to players earning them on merit. And he was not wrong. Kareem himself agreed with that sentiment. But when Magic Johnson suffered an injury and needed to be replaced on the All-Star roster, Commissioner David Stern named Kareem as the replacement. He played in the game and scored 4 points. He ended his final All-Star appearance with a skyhook. It is a poetic ending to that chapter, but it also illustrates how narrative and legacy shaped his treatment in ways that did not always match the actual performance. In 1977-78, when his numbers were elite, perception worked against him. In 1988-89, when his numbers were modest, legacy worked in his favor. The inconsistency reveals how much of how he was seen was shaped by things outside his control. Off the court, Kareem built a legacy that extended far beyond basketball and cost him something real in terms of public image. On June 4, 1967, a 20-year-old Alcindor traveled to Cleveland. Jim Brown, the legendary football player, had organized a meeting at the office of the Negro Industrial Economic Union. 12 leading African-American figures gathered to discuss Muhammad Ali's refusal to enter the military draft. Ali had made a decision based on his religious beliefs and his conscience. He was the heavyweight champion of the world, and he was willing to give up his title and face prison rather than fight in a war he believed was wrong. Several of the people who came to that meeting were skeptical. Some intended to convince Ali to compromise with the government and protect his career. They asked him hard questions over several hours. Ali held firm. He did not waver. And when the meeting ended, the group made a collective decision to stand with him. They held a press conference to support Ali's right as a conscientious objector. Alcindor was shaped by everything that happened in that room. He was especially shaped by watching Bill Russell navigate the meeting calmly and logically without anger, using reason and clear thinking to work through a complicated moral question. That became Alcindor's model for how to approach activism throughout his life. Not rage, not performance. Thoughtful, reasoned advocacy for what was right, even when it was costly. This commitment to speaking honestly about social and political issues never left him. When Michael Jordan made a remark during a 1990 Senate race in North Carolina that suggested he was unwilling to use his platform for political purposes, Kareem responded publicly and directly. He said Jordan had chosen commerce over conscience. He said that a person with Jordan's reach and influence and cultural power should not be afraid of losing endorsement money when civil rights and human rights were the issues at stake. This was a bold statement. It put Kareem in direct public disagreement with the most famous basketball player alive at the time. It did not make him more popular. It did not generate positive press coverage. It cost him. The cost of speaking his mind was something Kareem lived with throughout his career. The sports media frequently described him as cold, arrogant, or uncommunicative. These labels followed him. They shaped how casual fans understood him. They created a public image that many people accepted without examining whether it was actually true. Isaiah Thomas found these characterizations deeply unfair and found them painful to think about. He called the media's treatment of Kareem a tragic construction, something built up by people who did not want to engage honestly with who Kareem was. Thomas pointed out that Kareem was among the most articulate and intellectually engaged people he had ever encountered in his life. Kareem wrote books. He published essays on history and politics. He made documentaries. He engaged with complex ideas about race and justice and American history at a depth that very few athletes of any era have attempted. Thomas argued that the media did not call him uncommunicative because he had nothing to say. They called him uncommunicative because they did not like what he was saying. When his voice challenged comfortable narratives or questioned figures the media wanted to celebrate, they responded by suggesting he was difficult or detached rather than engaging with the substance of what he was actually saying. Pat Riley coached Kareem in Los Angeles and watched him from a closer vantage point than almost anyone outside the game itself. Riley has been consistent and clear about where he places Kareem in basketball history. He says Kareem is the greatest player of all time. He points to longevity and mental toughness as the qualities that set him apart. He makes a specific distinction that is worth paying attention to. He says other legends came into the NBA with potential, with raw ability that needed to develop over time. Kareem came in and bypassed that stage entirely. He was already great from the very first game he played at every level. He did not grow into a champion slowly. He arrived at every stage of basketball as a force and stayed that way. Modern conversations about the GOAT tend to be shaped by things that Kareem's legacy does not easily provide. They favor highlights. They favor perimeter players, guards, and wings who can do spectacular things on both ends of the floor that are easy to film and easy to share. They favor social media presence and shoe deals, and the kind of fame that comes from being constantly visible. They favor moments that can be replayed in a short video clip and generate a reaction. A 56-point varsity debut in 1966 does not exist on social media. A skyhook over a 7-footer in the middle of a regular season game in 1979 is not going to trend on any platform. The way modern sports culture processes greatness makes it structurally harder to see what Kareem was. The format works against him, but the people who actually played in his era, the ones who actually tried to stop him, the ones who actually had to build game plans around containing him, they do not need a highlight reel. They carry the memory with them. They know what they faced. Julius Erving said he was the greatest he ever played against. Larry Bird asked how you keep him off any list. Pat Riley said he will always be his greatest player. Magic Johnson placed him above Shaq. Isaiah Thomas called him the best and said the media's treatment of him was one of the most painful things he had witnessed in the sport. These are not casual opinions from people who watched from the outside. These are verdicts from competitors and teammates who understood the game at its deepest level and who measured Kareem against everyone else they had ever seen. Now step back and look at the whole picture. A child from Manhattan who dreamed of UCLA before anyone was recruiting him. A college player so dominant that the sport rewrote its rules to try to slow him down. A man who turned that restriction into the most unstoppable offensive weapon in basketball history. 3 national championships in college, 6 NBA titles as a professional, 6 MVP awards, 20 seasons played at the top level of the sport. The all-time scoring record. A finals MVP won at 38 years old. Pure testimony from the greatest players in the history of the game pointing to the same conclusion. Cultural courage that put him in direct conflict with comfortable narratives and cost him goodwill that other athletes protected by staying quiet. Intellectual engagement with the world around him that went far beyond what any sports media outlet gave him credit for. A career that proved greatness at the highest level is not limited to one era, one team, or one decade. Basketball royalty is not about the loudest highlight. It is not about the most retweeted moment or the most recognizable shoe. It is about what you built. It is about how the sport reacted to you. It is about what the people who faced you say when they speak honestly about what you were. It is about whether the greatness held up across time and pressure and change and age and every challenge the game could throw at you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated every level he ever played at. He forced the sport to change. He built an unblockable shot out of a rule designed to limit him. He stayed elite for 2 full decades. He won when everyone said he was past it. He spoke his mind when staying quiet would have been easier and safer. He carried himself with intelligence and dignity under pressure that broke other people. And the greatest players who ever lived, the ones who tried to stop him and could not, the ones who coached him and watched him work from the sideline. They still say his name first when the question is who was the best. That is not a debate anymore. That is a verdict. It has been delivered by Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Julius Erving and Isaiah Thomas and Pat Riley and Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan. It has been delivered by the record books and the championship banners and the scoring totals that stood for decades. And it has been delivered by a career that was not just great at one moment in time, but was great from beginning to end, at every stage, at every level, against every challenge. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is not just one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived. He is basketball royalty. He earned that crown in college. He kept it for 20 professional years. He never let it go. And no amount of shifting conversation or changing media format or new generation of debate will take it away from him. The legends already gave their verdict. The crown belongs to Kareem.